Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. You know, this topic's a bit of an odd one because I first mooted it a couple of years ago and never did do a video on it. The reason for that is because I was worried, I suppose, about giving it the due respect that it deserves and the gravitas that it requires. Not that I felt that I didn't have enough respect for it, but I certainly didn't want to convey the topic in a way that was flippant. And this topic is, of course, sexuality in RPGs, gender in RPGs, and race in RPGs. And I don't mean race as in elves, dwarves, halflings. I mean race as in playing a character of German extraction, Chinese origin, Kenyan, from Mozambique, who knows where. Someone who is not white and from the United Kingdom. And you know, I feel as a role player I do lend my characters enough gravitas, enough seriousness to make something that is different than me not the focus. That was a very badly structured sentence, so let me rephrase. If I play a gay character, I think I've played two, I don't make the homosexuality of the character the defining feature. I played one in Anima, and to be honest, for a character's sexuality and to be the defining feature in that game would probably be quite difficult because of all the explosions that are constantly going on, and sword fights. The fact is, the character was gay, that he was seeking out his kidnapped partner, his lover, and at no point in the game did he say to the rest of the group, as I was playing him, that the kidnapped lover of his was male. And so the rest of the group, the players and characters both, presumed that we were looking for some fair maiden. And I'd arranged this with the GM in advance. I said, my character is gay. He's not necessarily openly gay, well, he's not going to deny it if he's asked, but he's not pushing it in everyone's face either. He just is very much deeply in love with another man, and the necromancer that we were pursuing, actually he was more of a sort of Dr. Moreau, he was making all kinds of weird aberrations, has taken my soulmate, and I'm desperate to get him back. That is the driving force of my character. And GM was perfectly happy with this, except I said, I don't want to just announce at the beginning, look, is everyone cool with my playing a gay character, with my seeking out a male partner? Because you know what? We live in times where people should accept that kind of progressiveness. It's not even progressiveness, that kind of humanity. And so what, you know? But I deliberately left it quiet because I wanted to see what their reactions would be. I wanted them to react appropriately. I suppose in a bit of a sociological fashion I was testing the group for their maturity, and you know what, when we eventually found my character's male partner, a couple of the group did make snarky comments, did make remarks, both about the character and about myself. I'm not gay, and quite comfortably not so, but I don't have anything against people who are. However, because I was playing a gay character, they made various jokes about the fact that my character had a male lover who had been turned, unfortunately, into this chimera-like aberration. It was all thoroughly tragic. My character was in tears, with anger, as he was forced to slay his own lover. There was no way of fixing it. It was all very tragic, and it was quite a sad ending for my protagonist, who ended up sort of walking off into the distance. I ended up taking up my old character again after this, because he had kind of run his course. I was happy with that being his conclusion. And yet, yes, the rest of the party, not in character, more out of character, were a bit judgmental about the entire thing. And I found that a bit uncomfortable, a bit odd, but not unexpected, because after all I wouldn't have tested them like this if I hadn't actually thought that would be the outcome. It wasn't the outcome I'd hoped for, but it was an outcome that I suppose I had expected. In Call of Cthulhu I played a Jewish actor in 1920s who was so determined to get away from his Jewish roots. He had changed his name. His name was Hyman Goldstein, I think, and his acting name was Hiram Gold, which he felt was more appropriate. He was like an Errol Flynn type. but was also, I think, a dope fiend by the time the adventure was getting into full swing. So he was remarkably sallow, a bit Sander Cohen, Bioshock-esque, very much made up constantly, dragged through the mill. And this was prior to The Artist coming out. He was a silent movie actor and was being rapidly overtaken by technology. And he was gay as well. He was gay, and he had to keep that concealed, of course, because this was the real world. This was 1920s. And he was Jewish, and he was trying to keep that concealed. The group were a lot more respectful to the fact that my character was a Jew than they were to the fact that he was a homosexual, and I suppose that was more of an in-character thing than an out-of-character, because out-of-character no one actually cared this time. In character, however, there was a certain element of persecution to do with my character's sexuality, which I think was appropriate given the era. But was maybe a little heavier than I'd anticipated. But again, if they were playing their characters appropriately, that's fine, and I think that's something you've got to accept, something you've got to expect if you're playing someone who is out of the normative for the era. So, why am I doing this video? Why am I telling you about this? Why am I telling you about my experiences playing people that I'm not? Because every single character is someone I'm not. I once played with a role player. Every single character he played was called Anthony. Every single character he played was called Anthony, yes. He played a ranger in Dungeons and Dragons called Anthony. He played a vampire called Anthony. He played an operative in Slay Industries called Anthony. And so on. And his name was Anthony. It wasn't like he had some hero worship over someone called Anthony. It was just his name was Anthony. He needed to play himself, and every single character was largely the same. That to me isn't role-playing. I accept, however, he may have had various social issues that caused him to do this, to extend his personality into the game, which is fair enough. But it is quite the contrary to what I want to achieve in a role-playing game, and it's why I play so many women as well. I'm not a woman. And I play female characters because, in a way, I find them more interesting. A woman does not think entirely differently to a man, I'm afraid. We are both the same race. Whilst certainly we may have certain instinctive desires that, I don't want to burn any bridges here. There are certain genetic differences between men and women, males and females. But, I've never used that to define a character. I've just played women who I found to be interesting. I've found the characters more interesting as females than I have as males, and yet if I was asked to play the character as a male, I would quite happily, because the gender is not the defining feature of such a character. Specifically in Vampire, the Masquerade, I played a woman, Helene Milner, was embraced by Clan Toreador, and when she was embraced, it was very much a rape as far as her mindset was concerned, and if she believed it to be a rape, then a rape it was. She was taken. She did not ask for it. She did not desire it. She was on her way back to her campus. She had all number of problems in her life. She was, I believe, on amphetamines in order to actually get her through her exams. She was a university student working at O'Tolly's drive-in, and she needed to constantly take the drugs to keep her switched on, as it were. As she was on her way back, Toreador, Brett Stryker, Chicago by Night, took her, embraced her, and threw her into a battle that was going on. The Sabbat were trying to take Chicago, so the Camarilla were embracing shovelheads, essentially. After the immediate frenzy, bloodlust, and so on, Helene realised what she had become, or realised that something was amiss. Brett gave her very basic information, said, hey, whatever, make the best of it. I've just opened up your world, baby. And pretty much pissed off at that point. My character, I played her as if she had been raped. I played her feeling like she had been abused, like she had been taken advantage of, rather than hiding in a coffin or sleeping in a luxury penthouse. When she went back to her haven, which was just her bedsit, she just wrapped herself up in her duvet, pushed herself into the corner of the room, pushed everything else into the opposite corner, kept her eye on the door because she was worried that her attacker would come back, and ignominiously, that is how she slept for many nights of her existence as a vampire. When another one of the vampires in her coterie, a Bruja, referred to her at one point as a slut, I blew up in character, and partly out of character as well, because Helene felt like it was that kind of judgment that, well, it was not conducive to her healing process, shall we say. And yeah, I blew up at that character and that player, and I apologised to the player afterwards because I really got into it, and I was shaking as a player. My voice was quavering. I was so into the character, and I was told later by another one of the players, you actually had an adrenaline rush there. It was visible to all of us. You were so into the character, and it's because I felt like Helene had been so badly violated by having the blood drained out of her and being fed a drop from this toreador, that she did not want to be seen as if she'd asked for it, as if she wanted any of this. And I'm not, of course, saying that all female characters need to be victims, especially not rape victims. And yet, I played that character like that because I found it more interesting to play a female character who had been through that than I found it interesting to play a male character. Although now that I say it, I would be very interested to play a male character who's been through a similar trauma to see whether I'd play it any differently. I certainly, as stated before, play it with all due respect to the situation, to the scenario, and the adventure that we're playing. If we were playing a light-hearted game of Dungeons and Dragons that has no dark elements, I wouldn't play a character that had been through something like that. But it shouldn't preclude me from playing someone who's gay, which is, of course, just another sexuality. It shouldn't preclude me from playing someone who's female, which is just another gender, or indeed, if I was playing a game of Conspiracy X or Cyberpunk or anything set in a modern era, it shouldn't prevent me from playing someone perhaps of African American extraction, or maybe someone who's Japanese. And perhaps I struggle most with that as a racial thing, because there's a whole level of culture and tradition that comes with such a person. There's even an expectation to even put on an accent. I don't raise my voice at all to play a female character, not knowingly anyway, and I certainly don't put on an effeminate lisp in order to play a character who may be gay. But there's certain requirements put upon you when you're playing someone who is a native, let's say, to France, to speak with a French accent, which is, of course, a dreadful butchering of a French accent. And I struggle more with that, interestingly. So clearly my next character should be a French lesbian. That's what I've got to go for. I think the reason I'm discussing this is because I want to encourage you, role players, people who watch these videos, who occasionally get together and play with their friends, to play something that is challenging to them, something that's different to them more than challenging, something that isn't them, something they don't usually desire. I don't often play great hulks wielding swords because I have no interest in combat in RPGs, or very little, and that sets me out, I suppose, a bit. It's why I play games like Vampire more than D&D. I prefer diplomacy over combat, and a lot of those games devote entire chapters, multiple chapters, to the different ways in which you can hit things and repel things, and that's fine. That appeals to some people. It doesn't necessarily appeal to me. And all I'm saying, though, is I will play a character like that from time to time, because I like to test myself, and I like to expand my horizons, and I like to, explore new things. And role-playing is such a fantastic hobby for exploring things. I had no idea I'd react like that as Helene Milner. I had no idea I'd feel offended on behalf of my character Anima when the other players and the characters were judging him to some degree about being homosexual. I had no idea that it would be so disrespectful to another French role player to be playing a French character with an outrageous accent. And, I joke about it, and yet people will take that kind of thing personally. I don't mean to say tread on eggshells with everything. You should be whoever you want to be, providing you're not deliberately causing offence or being ignorant. But play a character that you never usually would. Try to stretch your boundaries. Try to go into those realms that you'd usually feel uncomfortable delving into, but speak with your GM about it first. Speak with your group about it first. Do something that is wholly different, that challenges you. And I would be very surprised if you don't feel in the least bit rewarded by doing so. You will feel at least a little rewarded playing something you never usually would, because the reason you got into role-playing in the first place was to explore fantastic adventures, to rummage through dungeons, to kill dragons, and to travel through space and solve crimes and so on. But I would like to think that as you evolve as a role player, you grow as a role player, you focus more and more on the character you're playing, on their beliefs, on their goals, their objectives. And the goals, objectives and beliefs of a character who is nothing like you can be such fun to explore. I sincerely recommend that you do so, because the reactions the rest of your players and the GM may have may not be what you're expecting, but that's all part of a learning experience, and I think you can find out an awful lot about people, about games, about characters, and about the game you're playing by pushing the envelope a little and doing something you wouldn't usually do. Thank you very much for watching.